Imagine a world where power was absolute, where the whims of one man could dictate the fate of millions, and where the most intimate bonds of family were twisted into something unrecognizable by the corrosive touch of unchecked authority. This is not a distant fantasy, but the chilling reality of imperial Rome, a civilization that, for all its grandeur and innovation, harboured a dark, pulsating heart of ambition, depravity, and psychological torment. Within the gilded cages of the Julio-Claudian dynasty, a family whose very name resonated with the echoes of gods and emperors, a story unfolded that would shock even the most jaded chroniclers of human excess, the twisted love affair of Emperor Caligula with his sisters. Our journey begins not with the mad tyrant of popular legend, but with a young man, Gaius Julius Caesar Germanicus, better known by his childhood nickname Caligula, meaning little boot. He was born into the very epicenter of Roman power, the great-grandson of Augustus, the first emperor, and the son of Germanicus, a beloved general, and Agrippina the elder, a woman of formidable spirit. His early life, however, was far from the idyllic existence one might imagine for a prince of Rome. It was a crucible of loss, paranoia, and political intrigue, a relentless forging that would shape his character in ways both profound and disturbing. This was the environment that nurtured the unique, almost conspiratorial bond he shared with his three sisters, Agrippina the younger, Drusilla, and Livilla. They were not merely siblings, they were fellow survivors, bound by shared trauma and a desperate need for mutual protection, in a world where betrayal lurked in every shadow. These sisters, each a figure of considerable beauty and intellect in her own right, would become far more than mere relatives in Caligula's life. They would be his confidants, his companions, and, according to the most sensational accounts, the objects of his most forbidden desires. Their story is a chilling exploration of how absolute power can corrupt not just the individual, but the very fabric of human relationships, blurring the lines between affection and obsession, between familial loyalty and perverse control. It is a narrative steeped in the dark allure of the forbidden, a psychological descent into the heart of a dynasty where the pursuit of pleasure and the consolidation of power became inextricably intertwined. We will delve into the historical accounts, sifting through the layers of propaganda, rumour, and genuine transgression that have obscured the truth for centuries. Was Caligula truly a monster, driven by an insatiable lust for his kin? Or were these allegations the calculated smears of political enemies designed to tarnish his name and delegitimize his reign? The answers are complex, residing in the murky depths of ancient sources, where fact and fiction often dance a macabre tango. But regardless of the absolute truth of every lurid detail, the enduring power of these stories lies in their ability to illuminate the psychological landscape of a man unburdened by moral constraints, and the terrifying vulnerability of those caught in his orbit. Prepare to confront the uncomfortable realities of a world where the boundaries of decency were constantly tested, where the pursuit of power knew no limits, and where the most sacred bonds of family were twisted into a horrifying spectacle. This is the story of Caligula's twisted love affair with his sisters, a tale that will challenge your perceptions of ancient Rome, provoke your most profound questions about human nature, and leave you with a haunting understanding of the price of unchecked power and the darkness that can fester within the human heart. To truly understand the labyrinthine depths of Caligula's reign and the unsettling intimacy he shared with his sisters, we must first journey back to the crucible of his childhood, a period forged in the fires of political ambition, public adoration, and profound systemic loss. He was born into the heart of the Julio-Claudian dynasty, a lineage that traced its roots to the deified Augustus himself. His parents were Germanicus and Agrippina the elder, figures of immense popularity and moral rectitude in Roman society. Germanicus, a brilliant general and the adopted son of Emperor Tiberius, was adored by the legions and the Roman populace alike for his military prowess and his unassuming demeanour. Agrippina, the the granddaughter of Augustus, was a woman of fierce independence, unwavering loyalty to her family, and a formidable public presence. Together they represented the idealized image of Roman virtue and imperial promise. Their union produced 9 children, of whom 6 survived to adulthood, including Caligula and his 3 sisters, Agrippina the Younger, Drusilla, and Livilla. This large, vibrant family, often accompanying Germanicus on his military campaigns, presented a stark contrast to the frequently dysfunctional imperial household. They were a symbol of hope, a beacon of stability in a world increasingly fraught with political machinations. However, this very popularity, this public adoration, would prove to be their undoing. Germanicus's untimely death in Antioch in 19 AD, under suspicious circumstances, sent shockwaves through the empire. Many, including Agrippina herself, suspected foul play, attributing his demise to the machinations of Tiberius, who allegedly viewed Germanicus's popularity as a threat to his succession. This tragic loss was the first brutal lesson for the young Caligula and his sisters, that even the most beloved and virtuous could be consumed by the insatiable appetite of imperial power. Germanicus's death marked the beginning of a terrifying descent into the paranoia and purges that characterized the reign of Emperor Tiberius. Tiberius, a shrewd and deeply suspicious ruler, increasingly retreated to his villa on Capri, governing Rome through a network of informants and fear. He viewed any potential rivals, particularly those connected to the popular Germanicus, with extreme suspicion. What followed was a systematic and brutal elimination of Caligula's immediate family. His mother, Agrippina the Elder, and his 2 elder brothers, Nero Caesar and Drusus Caesar, were accused of treason, imprisoned, and ultimately starved to death or driven to suicide. The once vibrant family unit was systematically dismantled, leaving the young Caligula and his 3 sisters as the last surviving direct descendants of Germanicus and Agrippina. This period was a relentless masterclass in fear and insecurity. Caligula and his sisters lived under a constant shadow, acutely aware that their lives hung by a thread, dependent entirely on the capricious will of Tiberius. Every word, every gesture, every friendship could be misinterpreted, twisted into an accusation of disloyalty. They witnessed firsthand the arbitrary nature of imperial power, the ease with which reputations could be destroyed and lives extinguished. This shared trauma, this collective experience of profound vulnerability and loss, forged an unbreakable, almost conspiratorial bond between the surviving siblings. They were isolated, distrustful of outsiders, and forced to rely solely on each other for emotional support and a semblance of safety. This was not merely sibling affection. It was a pact born of necessity, a desperate clinging to the last vestiges of their shattered family. Caligula's survival during this period was a precarious tightrope walk. He was summoned to Capri in 31 AD, where he lived under the direct watchful eye of Tiberius for 6 years. This was not a comfortable retirement. It was a gilded cage, a prolonged psychological torment. Caligula was forced to feign obedience, to suppress his true feelings, and to endure the old emperor's increasingly bizarre and cruel whims. He learned the art of dissimulation, of hiding his true intentions behind a mask of deference. His sisters, though not always physically present on Capri, remained a constant in his thoughts, their shared ordeal a silent understanding between them. This period of intense psychological pressure, coupled with the systematic destruction of their family, deepened their reliance on one another, transforming their familial ties into something far more intense, far more dependent, and ultimately far more twisted. It was during these dark years that the seeds of Caligula's future reign and the unsettling nature of his relationships with his sisters were sown, nurtured by fear, isolation, and an almost pathological need for control and affection within the confines of their own fractured world. When Tiberius finally died in 37 AD, the Roman world breathed a collective sigh of relief. The aging, paranoid emperor was gone, and in his place stood Gaius, the last surviving son of the beloved Germanicus. The accession of Caligula was met with an outpouring of joy and fervent hope. He was the golden boy, the symbol of a new era, a return to the perceived virtues of the Augustan age. The Roman people, weary of Tiberius's dark and secretive reign, embraced Caligula with an almost messianic fervour. And at his side, elevated to unprecedented prominence, stood his three sisters, Agrippina the Younger, Drusilla, and Livilla. Caligula, perhaps remembering the isolation and fear of his youth, immediately showered his sisters with extraordinary honours, distinctions that shattered centuries of Roman tradition. They were granted the ius trium sororum, the rights of three sisters, a privilege that placed them on a pedestal alongside the emperor himself. Their names were included in oaths of loyalty, a practice previously reserved for male members of the imperial family. They were given seats of honour at public games, often alongside Caligula himself, a visible display of their elevated status. Perhaps most strikingly, their images appeared on imperial coinage, a powerful propaganda tool that broadcast their importance across the vast Roman Empire. One sestertius, in particular, depicted Caligula's three sisters on the reverse, each identified by name and associated with a specific imperial virtue: Drusilla with Concordia, Concord; Agrippina with Securitas, Security; and Livilla with Fortuna. Fortune. This was an audacious move, a clear statement that these women were not merely decorative figures, but integral pillars of the new imperial order, a visible manifestation of the Julio-Claudian dynasty's renewed strength and unity. Yet, even amidst this unprecedented elevation, one sister stood apart, bathed in the singular, almost obsessive light of Caligula's devotion: Julia Drusilla. She was by all accounts Caligula's favourite, his confidant, his intellectual equal, and according to many ancient sources, something far more. Their bond, forged in the shared crucible of their traumatic childhood, transcended conventional sibling affection. It was a relationship marked by an intensity that bordered on the pathological, a closeness that fueled whispers and accusations across Rome. Suetonius, the Roman biographer, famously claimed that Caligula treated Drusilla as if she were his lawful wife, openly displaying affection and intimacy that shocked even the jaded sensibilities of the Roman elite. He reportedly took her as his mistress, and some accounts even suggest he prostituted her to his friends. However, this latter claim is often viewed with skepticism by modern historians, more likely a product of later political slander. The allegations of incest, particularly with Drusilla, form the dark heart of Caligula's scandalous reputation. The primary ancient sources, Suetonius, Tacitus, and Dio Cassius, all allude to these claims, though with varying degrees of certainty and detail. Suetonius, writing decades after Caligula's death, is the most sensationalist, presenting the incest. Tacitus, a more sober historian, refers to it as an allegation, a rumour. Dio Cassius, while acknowledging the rumours, often attributes Caligula's actions to madness or extreme depravity. Modern historians grapple with these accounts, attempting to discern truth from politically motivated slander. It is crucial to remember that after Caligula's assassination, his memory was condemned, and subsequent emperors, particularly the Flavian dynasty, had a vested interest in blackening his name to legitimize their own rule. Exaggerating his depravity, including incest, would have served this purpose perfectly, painting him as an unfit and monstrous ruler. However, the sheer persistence of these rumours and the unusual nature of Caligula's public displays of affection for Drusilla suggest that there was at least a perception of an incestuous relationship, if not the reality of it. Caligula's open favouritism, his public embraces, and his declared intention to make Drusilla his heir, a truly revolutionary concept in Roman law, which favoured male succession, all contributed to the widespread belief that their relationship crossed forbidden boundaries. It is possible that Caligula, in his burgeoning megalomania, deliberately cultivated this image, seeing himself as above the moral strictures that bound ordinary mortals. He may have viewed his sisters, particularly Drusilla, as extensions of his own divine will, and therefore immune to the taboos of mortal society. The very act of placing his sisters on coins, associating them with imperial virtues, and elevating them to such unprecedented heights, could be interpreted as a deliberate blurring of lines, a challenge to traditional Roman morality. The role of absolute power in this twisted dynamic cannot be overstated. Caligula, thrust into a position of unchallenged authority at a young age, with a traumatic past that had instilled in him a deep distrust of others, found solace and a perverse sense of control in his relationships with his sisters. In a world where everyone else was a potential threat or a sycophant, his sisters represented the last vestiges of genuine connection, albeit a connection warped by his psychological descent. His power allowed him to indulge every whim, to defy every convention, and to impose his will upon those around him, including his own family. The boundaries that governed normal human relationships simply ceased to exist for him. He was the emperor, a living god, and therefore beyond reproach. While Drusilla held the preeminent position in Caligula's affections, his relationships with his other two sisters, Agrippina the Younger and Livilla, were also complex and fraught with tension. Agrippina, ambitious and politically astute, was a formidable personality in her own right. She was married to Gnaeus Domitius Ahenobarbus, and later became the mother of the future Emperor Nero. Livilla, the youngest, was married to Marcus Vinicius. While they initially shared in the honours bestowed upon Drusilla, their fortunes often shifted in response to Caligula's volatile moods and Drusilla's unparalleled influence. There were rumours of affairs between Caligula and both Agrippina and Livilla, though these are even less substantiated than the claims concerning Drusilla. It is more likely that their relationships were characterised by a constant struggle for influence, a desperate attempt to maintain favour with their unpredictable brother, and a simmering resentment of Drusilla's elevated status. Agrippina, in particular, would learn valuable lessons from Caligula's reign, lessons she would later apply with ruthless efficiency in her pursuit of power, ultimately leading to the rise of her son, Nero, and her tragic end. The imperial court was a viper's nest, and even within the closest family bonds the pursuit of power and survival often led to betrayal and ruin, a horrifying testament to the corrosive nature of unchecked authority. Then, in the summer of 38 AD, a shadow fell over the gilded halls of the imperial palace, a shadow so profound that it would irrevocably alter the course of Caligula's reign and plunge him into a grief so consuming that it bordered on madness. Julia Drusilla, his beloved sister, his confidant, his alleged lover, died suddenly. The exact cause of her death remains unknown, lost to the annals of time, but its impact on Caligula was immediate, devastating, and utterly unprecedented. His reaction was not merely that of a grieving brother. It was the raw, unbridled anguish of a man who had lost the very anchor of his existence, the one person who truly understood him, or at least the one person he believed did. Caligula's mourning was extreme, a public spectacle of sorrow that bordered on the theatrical, yet felt chillingly genuine in its intensity. He forbade all public festivities, imposed a period of strict mourning throughout the empire, and even punished those who failed to display sufficient grief. He would wander the palace halls dishevelled and weeping, or abruptly leave Rome to seek solace in the solitude of the countryside, only to return equally distraught. He shaved his beard and hair, a traditional sign of mourning, and demanded that others do the same. The depth of his despair was so profound that it led many to believe that Drusilla's death was the catalyst for his subsequent descent into the tyrannical and erratic behaviour that would define the remainder of his reign. It was as if a vital part of his psychological architecture had been ripped away, leaving a gaping void that he desperately and violently sought to fill. But Caligula's grief transcended mere human sorrow. It manifested in an act of deification that was as audacious as it was unprecedented. He declared Drusilla a goddess, elevating her to the divine pantheon as Diva Drusilla Panthea, or All Goddess Drusilla. This was an honour typically reserved for deceased emperors, and even then, only after careful deliberation by the Senate. To bestow such a title upon a woman, and a sister at that, was a revolutionary act, a blatant disregard for religious and political norms. Temples were erected in her honour, priests were appointed to her cult, and her image was placed in the temples of the goddesses. She was worshipped alongside the traditional Roman deities, a testament to Caligula's boundless and perhaps unhinged devotion. This act of deification was not just a tribute, it was an attempt to immortalize his bond with her, to transcend the finality of death and to maintain her presence in his life, even if only in a divine form. It was a desperate, almost childlike refusal to accept loss, a powerful man's attempt to bend the very laws of nature and religion to his will. The psychological void left by Drusilla's absence was immense, and Caligula's attempts to fill it were increasingly erratic and disturbing. Without her, the fragile balance of his psyche seemed to unravel. The restraint, however thin, that he had previously exercised vanished. His paranoia intensified, his cruelty escalated, and his behaviour became increasingly unpredictable. Some historians suggest that Drusilla had been a moderating influence on him, a calming presence that kept his more extreme tendencies in check. With her gone, there was no one left to temper his impulses, no one to whom he felt truly accountable. He became isolated, surrounded by sycophants who dared not challenge his increasingly bizarre pronouncements. This period saw the rise of his most infamous acts of tyranny, including his self-deification, his cruel games, and his arbitrary executions. It was as if, in losing Drusilla, he had lost his last connection to humanity, transforming into the monstrous figure that history would remember. His subsequent relationships, particularly with his fourth and final wife, Milonia Caesonia, were often viewed through the lens of his obsession with Drusilla. Caesonia, described as neither beautiful nor young, but rather passionate and wild, bore a striking resemblance to Drusilla in her temperament and uninhibited nature. Caligula reportedly loved her with an intensity that mirrored his devotion to his deceased sister, even parading her naked before his friends and boasting of her sexual prowess. It is plausible that in Caesonia, Caligula sought to recreate the unique dynamic he had shared with Drusilla, to fill the void left by her death with a woman who could match his own unconventional and extreme personality. This desperate search for a replacement, this attempt to recapture a lost connection, speaks volumes about the depth of his emotional dependence on Drusilla and the profound impact her death had on his already fragile mental state. The shifting fortunes of his other sisters, Agrippina and Livilla, were also inextricably linked to Drusilla's death and Caligula's subsequent unravelling. While they had initially shared in the honours bestowed upon Drusilla, their positions became increasingly precarious after her demise. Without Drusilla's unique influence, they were more exposed to Caligula's volatile moods and his growing paranoia. Agrippina, ever ambitious, found herself in a dangerous game of imperial politics, eventually being exiled by Caligula along with Livilla on charges of conspiracy. Their banishment was a clear sign of Caligula's increasing isolation and his willingness to turn even against his remaining family members. The once unbreakable bond forged in childhood trauma had finally shattered, consumed by the very power it had sought to protect. The cult of Drusilla, born of grief and obsession, ultimately led to the further unravelling of the Julio-Claudian family, paving the way for even greater instability and violence within the imperial household. While Caligula's reign spiralled into increasing tyranny and madness, culminating in his assassination in 41 AD, the story of his sisters, particularly Agrippina the Younger, did not end with his demise. Indeed, their lives, though deeply scarred by their proximity to his twisted power, continued to shape the destiny of the Roman Empire, demonstrating a remarkable resilience, ruthless ambition, and the enduring, often horrifying price of surviving within the imperial family. Their narratives offer a chilling glimpse into the mechanisms of power, the strategic maneuvering required for survival, and the ultimate cost of ambition in a world where life was cheap and loyalty a fleeting commodity. Agrippina the Younger, perhaps the most formidable woman of the Julio-Claudian dynasty, stands as a testament to the power of ambition and strategic cunning. Exiled by Caligula, she returned to Rome after his death, her spirit unbroken, her resolve hardened by years of living under the shadow of imperial paranoia. She was a survivor, a woman who had witnessed firsthand the arbitrary nature of power and the fragility of life within the imperial court. These lessons, learned at a terrible cost, would become the foundation of her relentless pursuit of influence. Her primary goal was clear: to secure power for herself, and more importantly for her son, Lucius Domitius Ahenobarbus, who would later be known to history as Nero. Agrippina understood that direct power was inaccessible primarily to women in Roman society, but indirect power, wielded through a male proxy, was a path she would exploit with ruthless efficiency. Her return to Rome was not a quiet reintegration. It was a calculated re-entry into the political arena. She meticulously cultivated alliances, navigated the treacherous currents of senatorial politics, and strategically positioned herself and her son for future prominence. Her marriage to her uncle, Emperor Claudius, was a masterstroke of political maneuvering. It not only brought her back into the heart of the imperial family, but also allowed her to exert significant influence over the aging emperor. She systematically eliminated rivals, both male and female, who stood in her way, demonstrating a cold, calculating ruthlessness that mirrored, and perhaps even surpassed, that of her brother. Her ultimate triumph came when she persuaded Claudius to adopt Nero, effectively placing her son in direct line for the succession, bypassing Claudius's biological son Britannicus. This was a testament to her unparalleled political acumen, her ability to manipulate, persuade, and intimidate in equal measure. She was a woman who understood the game of power, and she played it with an intensity that would ultimately consume her. Livilla, the youngest of Caligula's sisters, fared less well. While she initially shared in the honours bestowed upon her by Caligula, her life was marked by a series of misfortunes and political entanglements. She was married to Marcus Vinicius, a respected senator, but her proximity to imperial power and perhaps her own ambitions proved to be her undoing. She was implicated in a conspiracy against Claudius, possibly orchestrated by Agrippina herself, who saw Livilla as a potential rival. Accused of adultery and treason, Livilla was exiled and eventually executed. Her life a tragic example of how even those within the imperial family could be consumed by the relentless machinations of power. Her fate serves as a stark reminder that survival in the Roman court was a precarious dance, and even the closest family ties could not guarantee safety when ambition and paranoia held sway. Caligula's assassination, orchestrated by disgruntled Praetorian guards and senators weary of his tyranny, brought an abrupt end to his 4-year reign. The immediate aftermath was chaotic, with a brief period of uncertainty before Claudius, Caligula's uncle, was proclaimed emperor. For Agrippina, Caligula's death was not an end but a new beginning. It removed the unpredictable tyrant who had exiled her and opened up new avenues for her ambitions. She would go on to become one of the most powerful women in Roman history, effectively ruling through her son, Nero, for a significant period. Her story, therefore, is not just one of survival, but of a calculated ascent to power, a testament to her unwavering determination to control her destiny and that of her lineage. The legacy of Caligula's sisters, particularly Agrippina, continued to shape Roman history long after his death. Agrippina's influence on Nero, her relentless drive to secure his position, and her eventual downfall at his hands are central to understanding the early years of Nero's reign. She was a force to be reckoned with, a woman who dared to challenge the traditional gender roles of Roman society and to assert her will in a male-dominated world. Her ambition, however, ultimately proved to be her undoing, as Nero, chafing under her control, eventually ordered her assassination. The story of Caligula's sisters, therefore, is not just about their relationship with him, but about their struggles for survival, power, and recognition in a brutal and unforgiving world. Furthermore, the incest allegations and the sensationalized accounts of Caligula's reign continued to be used as political propaganda by subsequent emperors. The Flavian dynasty, which succeeded the Julio-Claudians, had a vested interest in portraying Caligula as a depraved monster, thereby legitimizing their own rule by contrasting it with the excesses of their predecessors. This deliberate blackening of his name, often through the exaggeration of existing rumours and the invention of new ones, further cemented his image as a tyrant and a pervert. The stories of his twisted love affair with his sisters, whether entirely accurate or partially fabricated, became a powerful tool in the hands of those who sought to control the historical narrative. Thus, the sisters, even in death, remained entangled in the political machinations of Rome, their reputations forever linked to the dark legend of their brother, a haunting testament to the enduring power of rumour and the insidious nature of historical revisionism. As we emerge from the shadowy depths of Caligula's reign, we are left with a narrative that is as captivating as it is disturbing. This story transcends mere historical curiosity to become a profound exploration of the human psyche under the immense pressure of absolute power. The twisted love affair of Caligula with his sisters is not just a tale of incest and depravity. It is a complex tapestry woven with threads of trauma, ambition, psychological instability, and the corrosive influence of a dynasty that saw itself as above the laws of gods and men. It is a story that forces us to confront the uncomfortable realities of a world where the most intimate bonds of family could be warped into something monstrous, and where the pursuit of power could lead to the complete annihilation of moral boundaries. We have journeyed through the crucible of Caligula's childhood, a period of profound loss and fear that forged an unbreakable, almost conspiratorial bond with his sisters. We have witnessed his meteoric rise to power and the unprecedented honours he bestowed upon them, particularly his beloved Drusilla, elevating them to a status that shattered Roman tradition and fueled whispers of a relationship that defied all norms. We have grappled with the sensational allegations of incest, sifting through the biased accounts of ancient historians to discern the elusive truth, recognizing that the reality may lie somewhere in the murky space between genuine transgression and politically motivated slander. We have seen how Drusilla's death plunged Caligula into a grief so profound that it seemed to shatter his already fragile psyche, leading to her deification and his descent into madness. And we have followed the divergent paths of his surviving sisters, Agrippina and Livilla, as they navigated the treacherous currents of the imperial court, their lives a testament to the enduring struggle for survival and power in a world where loyalty was a fleeting commodity. Interpreting the historical sources surrounding Caligula and his sisters is a perilous task. The ancient chroniclers, particularly Suetonius, often wrote with a clear political agenda, their narratives designed to entertain, to moralize, and to legitimize the ruling powers of their own time. Distinguishing fact from fiction, separating genuine historical accounts from sensationalized rumors, requires a critical eye and a deep understanding of the political context in which these stories were written. Yet, even if we cannot definitively prove every lurid detail of Caligula's alleged transgressions, the enduring power of these narratives lies in their ability to illuminate the psychological landscape of a man unburdened by moral constraints and the terrifying vulnerability of those caught in his orbit. The very existence of these rumours and the public perception of Caligula's relationships with his sisters speak volumes about the anxieties and moral ambiguities of Roman society itself, Beyond the historical analysis, the story of Caligula and his sisters is a profoundly human tragedy. It is a story of a family torn apart by its power, of siblings whose love was twisted into something unrecognizable by the corrosive touch of ambition and fear. It is a story of a young man thrust into a position of absolute authority, whose psychological wounds festered and ultimately consumed him, and of the women who were both his victims and, in the case of Agrippina, his successors in the ruthless game of power. Their story reminds us that behind the grand narratives of history, behind the marble busts and the imperial titles, lie real human beings with all their complexities, vulnerabilities, and capacity for both great love and profound cruelty. The enduring fascination with Caligula and his sisters is a testament to the timeless power of their story. It is a cautionary tale about the dangers of unchecked power, the corrupting influence of absolute authority, and the dark side of human nature that can be unleashed when all constraints are removed. Their twisted love affair, whether real or imagined, has become a potent symbol of imperial decadence, a chilling reminder of how easily the most sacred bonds can be broken, and how quickly the pursuit of power can lead to self-destruction. Their story continues to resonate because it speaks to our deepest fears and our most enduring questions about the nature of good and evil, the complexities of family, and the enduring legacy of a dynasty that, for a brief, terrifying moment, seemed to hold the world in its grasp, only to be consumed by its dark, insatiable desires.